This is Duke University.
I'm Bill Bolding. I'm the Dean of the Fuqua School of Business, and this day gives me great pride to see what the Net Impact Club has been able to put together in conjunction with CASE and EDGE. It's just a fantastic effort to produce amazing speakers, amazing content, and to convene a group like you is something that just gives me great joy to be a part of a business school that's able to do something as you've experienced today. But the day is not yet done. We have one final closing session, and we're incredibly fortunate, in my view, to have Jean Case with us. And we have a special term that we reserve for people who we consider to be truly significant leaders, which is a leader of consequence. And Jean is someone who I think exemplifies the idea of leader of consequence. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why that's so. I think it starts with the choice of her name. Notice that every time we say her name, it's a subliminal message of support for the Center for the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship. So thank you for that. But she started her career in the tech sector, most notably the work that she did at America Online, where she basically was the marketing and branding person behind the launch of the online service, was the person behind taking AOL public, and responsible for turning a service, kind of this brand new breakthrough technology, into what became a household utility and has changed fundamentally all of our lives by doing so. She then went on to co-found the CASE Foundation 20 years ago with her husband Steve. She is the CEO of the CASE Foundation, and so she is not a bystander in the foundation's activities. She is very actively engaged, and if you look at what it is that she's trying to push for, it's very interesting. At a moment in time where we are operating with a lot of fear, her view is that we need to be more fearless in our approach to social change. And she is using the foundation as a platform to drive three particular areas: civic engagement, so that we can all get in the game together; unleashing entrepreneurship, so that we can unlock the potential that exists in all kinds of corners of society; and revolutionizing philanthropy, which are three incredible goals that she is bringing to life. In addition to her role with the CASE Foundation, she is also the chairman of the National Geographic Society Board of Trustees. She is on the board of the Accelerate Brain Cancer Cure, and my fine print is very fine here, and the BrainScope Company. And so she is actively engaged in a number of domains that are really making a difference, making an impact on many, many lives. And so this is a fantastic thing to have Jean here with us today, and I'm also extremely proud to have Kathy Clark moderate the conversation with her. Kathy is one of our own. She is the person who heads up our initiative on impact investing, more commonly known as I3. She is also a co-principal investigator on the Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator at Duke, which is a phenomenally important activity. She's been named one of the top 20 women in philanthropy, social innovation, and civic engagement. And in my view, she is the thought leader in the world today around social impact investing. And so with that, please take over. Thank you both.
Whew, that was unexpected. So I am just delighted to welcome Jean to our community today in the middle of what has been such an incredible day of inspiration and education and sharing. And so just so pleased that Jean's got to see a little bit of our environment. But more important than that, I'm actually thrilled that the two of us just get to chat. So as we were saying, we're going to forget all of you are here for a minute.
Just riff, right?
And just riff, because we don't get to do this, even though we've worked in similar circles for quite a number of years.
That's right.
So we're delighted to do that. So to start out, tell us a little bit about how you started the Case Foundation, what it does, and what you're hoping to accomplish with it.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And before I do that, thank you, Dean Boulding, for that very gracious introduction. I always go, really? So that was really nice, thank you. And Kathy, rarely do I sit on a stage where I say, okay, I should be the one doing the interviewing, because you are absolutely a preeminent thought leader and just leader overall and an important friend and partner to the Case Foundation. So I'm super grateful to be here with you.
Thank you. It is mutual.
And really grateful to be in this crowd. I was really looking forward to today. I spent some time with some students before we came to the stage today, and that was really exciting. Big fan of Duke and all that is Duke. So I've really been looking forward to it. And I think as we talk today, hopefully what will become clear is there's some shared DNA, I think, around some of the things that are being both taught and practiced and led out of here, and some of the things that we've been trying to do at the Case Foundation for the last 20 years. But how did the Case Foundation get started? That's an interesting question. The truth of the matter is I had crossed sectors in my career. I had actually started, although I went to the nation's first online service very, very early, I actually came to Washington, D.C. working in the Reagan administration. And it wasn't too long after that that I heard about this startup. And no one knew, there was no term for the internet at that point, but it was a really exciting opportunity that I believed could democratize access to ideas, information, and communication if it could be taken to the mainstream. So I think from a very early age and early time in my career, I was about movement building. And then, of course, I landed this inky-dinky startup wasn't called AOL then, it later became AOL. And we were able to really take that to a major movement as well. But during that time, I think if you had walked the halls of AOL in the early days, you would not have necessarily known that you were in a startup, because what really made that company successful was a strong passion that people had to change the world, to level the playing field, to democratize this access that I had talked about. So I think my husband and I both always had in us a belief that to whom much is given, much is expected, and that was, I think, a value that our parents really instilled in us. But more importantly, we just really wanted to feel like we would spend our time and talent trying to change the world. So it was probably almost inevitable that if we ever had the means to do so, we would try to turn our time and attention to philanthropic things. When I was at AOL, I had the privilege of standing up the AOL Foundation. It was under my responsibility to do so. So I kind of cut my teeth a little bit there, where I learned a little bit about, of course, I was a corporate foundation, but it sort of almost was my entree into this world a little bit. And to make it clear, I do talk about when we started the Case Foundation, but to understand the story more fully, I started my life as a recipient of philanthropy. I was raised by a single mom, one of 4 kids, and I simply couldn't have been or done any of the things that my life, later brought to me without the help of others, really championing me and giving of their time and resources to help me. And so it was very personal to me. So when I decided to leave AOL, of course, by that time the company had gone public. There were great resources we had, and we didn't really feel like we wanted to live in a world where we had disproportionate resources and wouldn't care about others. And so that really was kind of what was behind it. But hey, we were tech entrepreneurs, and we believed strongly in the power of the entrepreneurial spirit to change the world. And so we decided that we would start a foundation that was a little bit different, and our tagline is, we invest in people and ideas that can change the world. And people usually go like, so what do you do actually? Because a lot of foundations will say, well, we're about healthcare, or we're about education, or we're about Africa, whatever. We were actually issue agnostic. What we believed was the power of a cross-sector approach combined with an entrepreneurial spirit at work and entrepreneurial approaches had great potential to create, movements and take things to the mainstream and democratize all kinds of stuff. So, at the foundation, we're not issue specific. Our issues have changed through the 20 years that we have, and it's due to a really talented team who builds business plans, and then we decide what we're going to focus on.
That's fantastic. As you were talking, I was reminded that some of my background actually dovetails with some of yours in ways that you may not even realize, in that I was working at a foundation in New York in the 90s that was looking to figure out how to democratize the internet. And we were working, everyone was going to laugh at this now, we were working at figuring out how to help people use the internet for election information.
Right.
And we did it, right, which is, right, ironic. And we did a campaign in collaboration with the AOL Foundation.
Yeah, we were deeply engaged in civic engagement work at AOL. And actually, if you peel back the onion, you'll see the similarities between some of our areas of focus that we took to the Family Foundation that we had sort of started at AOL.
So this idea of democratization of information has led you to impact investing.
Correct.
Which is something that we care a great deal about as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the past few years as this has really started to grow and become more serious? And you've had a very important role in that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, but right back at you. So yeah, we're super jazzed by the potential of impact investing. And as I said, because we had, started as entrepreneurs and saw the power of one company in terms of the ability to change the world, it was only natural that we would go, well, can we find more of those? And so we had actually been doing what today, no question, was impact investing for some time before we knew there was a term for it. Because a lot of smart people had gotten in a room, and you might have been in that room, Kathy, I guess you were, and decided that there would be this term impact investing. And so when we heard about that, we're like, wait, we've been doing that. We didn't know it was like a thing. We just said it's something that you can do to really, put your capital into great entrepreneurs with great ideas for companies that can provide both a social return and a financial return. And we were super jazzed. So when we learned there was kind of a nascent movement taking place, a lot of early pioneers that were there, we jumped in and asked the question, gosh, is there a role we can play? Is there some way we can be helpful? Because we believe so strongly in the power of this movement. We'd love nothing more than to spend a lot of time and resource on our own expertise in movement building, trying to see if we can help move it along.
And I think it's been wonderful to have the kinds of perspectives that you and your team and other colleagues bring to it, because I think there were a lot of pioneers in the early days who were in little small rooms talking to each other all the time, and that's not how you build a movement.
Not at all. In fact, it's funny, when I was meeting with the students earlier, I said, I don't consider it really a valuable room unless we have some skeptics. Mm-hmm. Because we define our work as inspire, educate, and activate. That's how you build a movement. And we're always trying to inspire by doing great storytelling, case studies, pointing to some of the stuff that you guys are publishing here, really trying to bring light to the world around, hey, there's this cool area that you should look at if you care about the world. Think about aligning your capital with your values. How cool is that? And we're helped along by sort of a transition we're seeing in the marketplace, which is this new generation who sort of lead with that. First as conscious consumers, but they're quickly becoming conscious investors too, right? So, it was for us sort of a natural to see that and say, we really want to jump in.
So what have you seen from your perspective of this that maybe our students haven't seen yet in terms of why this is growing and what the opportunity is for it to grow further? Because most people don't have impact products in their portfolio today.
Correct. That's correct. So have seen a lot, but I would say the one thing that I think has blown me away more than anything else, I just mentioned skeptics. So there's one person, I won't out him on this stage, but there's one person that I work with very closely in a variety of things that we did, and he's a world-renowned investor. He did something really amazing that you're probably learning about in the business schools. And so I naturally, when I decided we were going to jump into this, he was one of the first people I called. I think it was 2009, maybe it was 2010. And he said, oh, Jean, we always love what the Case Foundation is going to jump into. On this one, I think you really got it wrong. I'm just not seeing it, Investors are too skittish after the financial crisis. I just don't see any potential here. Well, today, He's one of the biggest champions of impact investing that exists out there. And that isn't an uncommon story, that we have seen tremendous movement in a short period of time from people who came to impact investing either just maybe a little skeptical or asking questions or just not knowledgeable at all about what it was, to activated, to they're jumping in. And it's still very much a nascent market. It's still early days. There's just no question about that. But what we watch with interest is how movements happen, right? How they cross the chasm. And if you look at the early days of venture capital, it looked a lot like impact investing has looked in recent years. Okay, it's like coming along, seems kind of messy. The ecosystem isn't entirely filled out. Investors aren't really sure what they're dealing with. The typical tools you rely on as an investor maybe aren't there. And then what happened? Finally, pension funds were given the opportunity to jump in, and there were a couple of obvious hot places, and the hockey stick happened, and the rest is history. And whether impact investing will play out like that, we don't know, but I can tell you these early days feel a lot like those early days of venture capital. So, I think they're important, and I think it's not going to be one of those things where, 20 or 30 years maybe we'll be here. I think at some point there will be a tipping point and it will turn.
Hope so.
Yeah, and soon.
Yeah, I hope so. So speaking of tipping points, taking a little bit more of an academic view on this, I've been probably working for at least 5 years on the notion of we need data about this to convince people about what's going on.
It's a really important voice.
And we were tweeting about our data drive.
The Ds we were going to talk about
We were
today.
having some fun this week tweeting about Ds. So this is my data D question, which is, we've been doing some work together around what do people need to know to understand the field.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Impact Investing Network Map and
Sure,
what
I'd be
that
happy
is?
to do that.
Yeah.
And I think Kathy knows this story, but I talked about inspire, educate, and activate, right? And I just said, what's surprising is we get people to activation sometimes before we would ever expect they're ready to go. But they go, okay, what's out there? What's the ecosystem? Who's doing what? And I'd sat on too many stages of these financial conferences or whatever, and they're saying, so tell me, where do I go to find? And the bottom line was there just wasn't really a resource around data to tell us what was going on in the impact investing ecosystem. So finally I'm on stage one day, and much to the chagrin of my team that was with me, I said, all right, we'll do it. We'll create a visualization tool. It'll be a network map of the impact investing ecosystem. And of course I see my staff back like their eyes getting wider. But then we committed to that, and we're really glad that we did. And of course you've been an important partner in looking at it and helping us build it. It is intended as an open source tool to make transparent activity reported and data out of the impact investing field, fully searchable. And I think we have a little piece to introduce.
We have a video.
All right, great.
Cue up the video, and then we'll talk about it after.
What happens when you invest for both social and financial return? You become an impact investor. Impact investing could be a $1 trillion market. Imagine scaling innovative business models that address our most pressing social challenges. Sounds great, but wondering how you fit in? Don't know how to get started? In order for the field to thrive, investors need to better understand how, where, and what businesses are driving change and creating social impact. That's why we're developing the Impact Investing Network Map, a data visualization tool designed to help any investor or entrepreneur access the best publicly available information on impact investments, to explore relationships between companies, funds, and investors, to discover who is active and who is leading, and understand key market trends. Whether you're looking for investors that have funded clean water projects in Africa, or innovative education companies in the US, or something in between, we want to help you sort publicly available data based on the geographies and sectors that matter to you. The best part is, we're developing the network map right now, and you can be a part of it. Sign up for email updates, share your ideas, and make sure your data is on the map. Together, we can unleash the power of impact investing. Join the movement and explore with us.
So that's just a quick summary to tell you what this is about. And I will tell a personal story, and that is that we have been making impact investments for quite some time. But I've had this one portfolio for some number of years, and I decided that I needed to do a little bit more of the walk, not just talk the talk, and invest across all asset classes. And so I am moving one portfolio I have to 100% impact investing. And it has been a hard road to hoe. And I'm so happy I'm doing it, because now when I sit in front of investors, I really sort of can understand the challenges that they feel. And honestly, I feel like I need this impact investing map more than most people out there right now. But it's been a little bit of a journey, and I intend to make transparent this journey that I'm going through. And one thing I will say, and it's the same common theme I've hit on twice now in this talk, and that is that we have moved people to activation, but they don't have a market ready to take them over the finish line. The high net worth advisors that are out there, many of the banks, we saw Goldman buy Imprint Capital, et cetera, they have to buy the expertise that's out there because it hasn't been naturally developed within the financial community. And many high net worth advisors just don't even know where to start. They're hearing from their customers, as are, the high net worth teams at the banks, I want to do this. I want to jump into this. I want to, see what kind of opportunities there are for me to invest. And too often they're met with sorry. And that was my personal experience with my last advisors, was I spent 2 years saying, I want to move more asset classes. I want to get deeper into impact. And they just couldn't find the deals. Well, indeed, what we know is the deals are out there, and what's lacking is a transparency around the ecosystem.
So what's interesting about this is the idea this is not an investment platform. This is not places you can put your money.
And
this
it's
is
not
deals,
guidance. It is merely
deals
data
that have been done in the past.
Correct.
And
correct.
organizing them so you can kind of see relationships between different portfolios and
based on what you
investments.
might be interested in. And I also really need to say it's completely incomplete. We made a commitment to launch it as an open tool. We've asked a lot of really smart people like Kathy and others to come around the table and say, okay, what do you think? What do we need to tweak? How's it looking to you? But we're frustrated by not having enough data, but we've made a commitment to do a minimum viable product launch of it and put it out there. And we're hoping that more and more data comes into it. There's significant data to show that it's a very active ecosystem, but our hope is that by putting it out there and getting lots of parties excited about it, we'll see more and more data, and it will be full.
And I have to think, because we work a lot with entrepreneurs who are looking for capital, and the most common question is, who has funded enterprises like me?
Right.
I'm in Kenya, I'm working in global health. How many deals have been done in the last 6 months, and no one has that data.
Correct. So we're excited about the early data that we'll bring forward on that, and I do think it will address both the supply and the demand side, and we know we need more of that. Because there are some myths around impact investing. One of them is, as I'm sure many of you know well, that impact investing is necessarily concessionary, that you can't meet benchmarks or market rate returns across asset classes with impact investing. And going to data, as you well know, and Duke has been a part of this, there's just more and more compelling data coming out all the time from industry experts who are pointing out that across asset classes, we're seeing impact investments either be market rate or beyond. And that's exciting to see. So that's certainly one of the myths. The other myth is that there just isn't good deal flow. There's not enough out there. Well, there actually is quite a bit out there, but again, it's hidden. And so this is really a desire to really try to play down some of those myths by pointing out some of the investor activity and by showing the amount of deal flow that's really out there across asset classes.
Absolutely, and I think your beta or your new launch is going to come up in a few weeks,
That's
as
right.
I understand it, and it'll be really interesting to get the feedback from the people in this room.
Yeah, we invite
and the people
everyone
watching.
to please check it out when we put it out there. This will only be successful if it really does have the wisdom of the crowds applied to it. And so, we welcome everything from, if you know data that isn't there, giving us either insight to how we get it or, encouraging someone to put the data in, to your criticisms, if it's not helpful. It is a little bit of a risk for us. It's been over a year of investment. It's been a considerable capital investment to create the map. And we really hope that it's a successful, viable tool out there. Like all things, we could put it out there and find the markets, not so much. But what we've heard, and because you've been in these conversations, is there's a great demand for this data, and we hope it fits the bill.
Well, I feel like it's also addressing something that we hear a lot, and I hear it from my students as well as other professionals, which is people trying to create their own maps of the space because it's so confusing.
Right.
And this one's really focused on what has already happened.
Right.
That's real.
Right.
And giving people a visual sense of that, which I think is potentially really, really exciting. But it will take a lot of joiners to make it so. I wanted to change topics for a little bit. The other movement that the Case Foundation has been committed to is something you're called inclusive entrepreneurship.
That's
Can you
right.
tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Well, it turns out in this great nation, we celebrate our entrepreneurship culture, really, and I think everyone does. I don't think there's any sort of dispute about that. And we should. It's powered our economy. It's really driven, the jobs that provide the economic activity as well. And it's brought us the innovations that have changed our lives. But we've built that with one hand behind our back because we've mostly relied on innovation and an entrepreneurial sector that has mostly been comprised of white males. And it's not intentional, it's just the way of things. I mean, I think when we look at, well, why could this be? You think about sort of the history of America and who had the power and how did we get to today. And the fact of the matter is in venture capital, it was largely driven by males in its earliest days. They came out of elite institutions, and their networks were other males in elite institutions and those kind of communities. I really want to make clear when we talk about inclusive, we're not saying anybody did this on purpose, but we are saying we think we have to be intentional about changing it. And there's a couple of data points. So in the last few years, only 10% of venture capital has gone to women founders. That means 90% has gone to men. Only 1% to firms that had an African American founder, 99%, in the other direction. And, it's really interesting is when we share this data out there, people go, really? Well, and then if you peel back that onion a little further, at the top 100 venture firms, 93% of the partners are male, the vast majority of those white. So it really is just one of those things where unless we look at the data, unless we peel back the onion, we can't know that we've unintentionally been leaving half of the market on the sidelines. And isn't that an exciting opportunity? Think about how much we've done with one hand behind our back. Now think of what we can do if we can include all sectors of the market in the terrific opportunity to bring new companies and new innovations to communities who need them most and many times have been left out of the innovations that come
So
forward.
how do you as a foundation, once you recognize that problem, how do you act on it?
So we really try to bring thought leadership, going back to inspiring, educating, and trying to activate. So inspiring, we're really just trying to get folks to recognize that, whether it's unconscious bias or just habit. I mean, I think about myself, and like when we first started getting into this, I sort of thought about my own circles. And, Sally Krawcheck tells a very funny story because she leads a women-led financial organization. And she said, if someone would have said, well, who's right for this job? She said, without meaning to, I would have said, 53-year-old, probably blonde from Yale. Well, she's 53-year-old blonde from Yale. She was just saying that the way we see the world really is usually with what we're most comfortable with or what we're most familiar with. And I think if we can recognize that, that's important. So that's a big part of what we're doing. And I think, I did a TED Talk on it just recently. And, we're writing, we're blogging. We did a campaign called Faces of Founders. That was a lot of fun. Because what we basically did was ask people to tell us their stories, and we specifically were asking if they were inclusive entrepreneurs or if they knew, and if they were a champion of inclusive entrepreneurs, or if they just believe in the movement. And it was so much fun. And so we partnered with Fast Company, and they will publish 5 of the stories, and we're taking it a little bit further with some permanent permanent Facebook page, permanent meaning, while the campaign goes on for the next year or two, that will highlight a lot of the stories that didn't make it into the top 5. And one of the things I did in my TED Talk, which I thought about doing here, is I showed a Google search that we did at the office under successful entrepreneurs. And every image was a white male. And so the bottom line is, Damon John is out there, Oprah Winfrey's out there. We have so many model men, women, from inclusive communities that are leading awesome companies, but we're just not being intentional about putting them in the spotlight and telling their stories and referring to them when we talk about this movement. So that's a big part of it. And then the educating is really trying to share the data. And activating, we're working with firms and leaders across the investment space. Many of them, by the way, are saying, okay, I didn't know, I can do something about that. And that's activation. And I would say to anyone in the audience today, You know, who might you know that you could inspire, that you could educate, or that you could ask to just take a look at it and be intentional in their own way of taking advantage of what I consider a tremendous opportunity to seize in the nation. I mean, it really could be game-changing if we really kind of fire up this entrepreneurial circle beyond what it's been to date.
Totally. And then just one other thing before I open it up for questions, so start thinking about your questions. I also have been a great admirer, sitting in Durham, of some of the geographic things.
Thank you, because that's where I was going to go next.
That you and Steve, the Rise of the Rest tour that you've done, and really recognizing, I think in your TED Talk you said, some incredible percentage.
I'm sorry, 75% of venture capital went to 3 states: Massachusetts, New York, and California.
And that's where all the good ideas are, I'm sure.
Well, the only problem with that is if I show you a map, which I did in my TED Talk, of where Fortune 500 companies were started, it's amazing how many dots are between the coasts. As we get out there to communities like this and communities all over the United States, whether it's my husband's Rise of the Rest tour, or whether it's our work at the foundation doing days like this, looking at the entrepreneurial ecosystem and communities, we are blown away by the talent and the innovation we see coming across the country. I do want to say to you, think about the electoral map, okay? Those were the states that were left with only a quarter of the pie to share, between 47 of them, okay? And, why do people say, wait a minute here, like this doesn't feel fair? Well, because it's not fair, because there isn't a level playing field. And going to our passion around democratizing access to things, we need to democratize access to the American dream, to the idea that anyone from anywhere can bring the next great company forward. And that's just not reality today. So not trying to beat anyone over the head, just trying to say, hey, can we recognize we're not there, and can we do some things to change this up?
Fantastic. So I would like to open it up for questions. I believe we have some roving mics. Can't see very well, but there's one right here. Let's start with Jenny. And if you could identify yourself and your affiliation.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Harms. I'm a Fuqua 08 grad, and I currently work at Encourage, which is a community foundation in rural Wisconsin. And I just want to dig down a little deeper on your last question, Kathy. Wisconsin gets 1.2% of that, whatever's left over.
Right.
And we've been following Rise of the Rest and other efforts, and they're getting to cities like Milwaukee or Louisville, but they're not getting to rural communities. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that, or what you're seeing where people can be more intentional about including those communities that provide this country with a lot of resources that really feel like they're being left behind.
Yeah, but I must say to you, it isn't just the rural communities that feel left behind, because even some of the big cities, as you know well, between the coasts are left behind in terms of left out of. And just before I finish that answer, let me just say, it isn't actually just about the capital. In fact, I think when you talk to most successful entrepreneurs, they will tell you it was the access to elite networks, it was access to people, other people who had built successful companies, it was access to mentoring, it was a whole suite of things of which capital is only one. And sometimes those other things in that suite matter more at a important point in building the company. Your point's really well taken on rural. I think we've done 26 cities with Rise of the Rest. Every tour is different. My husband leads that effort, and for those of you that don't know, he has a Rise of the Rest bus, and he goes out on a bus and he does 5 cities in a region.
Could you explain what they do when they get to a city, just so people
Sure. Well,
don't
they
know?
do a little bit like what we've done today, which is they look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They, of course, have studied it before they go in, much like we did today. They bring other investors, other leaders, the press along to really highlight some of the exciting things that are taking place in those areas. They tweet about it. They'll do a video on it when they're done. Pitch competition at the end of the day, so we always leave investments behind in places that we go. But more importantly, it has now created a national network of entrepreneurs from, let's say, non-obvious places, even though they're not rural, that come together, and the power of even that networking we're already seeing has made a difference. And we'll do a Rise of the Rest conference later this year, or in the spring actually. So it's a whole movement, and I've been really proud of him, and he's been an important voice out there for the need to bring investment, capital, attention, mentoring, across the United States to level the playing field. But it isn't like do it because it's a good thing to do. It's do it because there are awesome opportunities that we're missing out on.
Great. Another question back here?
We have an organization.
We have a mic for you. Thank you.
We have an organization in Saxapahaw, about 30 minutes from here, that has a 80% female board. We've built a female-driven sharing economy. It's called the Sharing Basket. And as we worked hard to bring the triple bottom line to investors in the last few decades and convince them that there's money in it, we have a model that doesn't produce money, and we're trying to help our community. It's a feel-good project. So is there anything you can say about how we could bring that, expand that model to a larger base?
Sure, well, I'd love to learn more about it after this, and I will tell you that we were at American Underground in Durham today and some other places, and we were really impressed with the amount of inclusive activity taking place here in Durham, really impressed. And so one of our sort of, resources that we can bring is what we call a megaphone and a spotlight. So I'd love to learn more about what you're doing, and we'd be happy to kind of try to tell the world.
Great. Other questions? Make sure I'm seeing across over
Over
there.
here?
Yep.
Hi, Gene. Monty Montoya. I'm the CEO of SightLife, and we're a nonprofit organization that recently spun out a for-profit organization. I was curious, out of the foundation, if you've made any program-related investments in for-profit organizations, or if all of your granting has been purely to nonprofit organizations.
Right, so we have a little bit of an unusual structure that I don't know if I made entirely clear when we opened, which is the foundation we see as only one piece of how we try to have impact. The foundation, and then my husband and I have both served in appointed roles or around policy roles, and then additionally our personal investing. The vast, vast majority of our investment in impact investing has been through personal investing, but it has been aligned in areas where we're trying to have impact on all those fronts. So we call that all the arrows in our quiver, and those are the different arrows. But yes, we have done PRIs, but we have not used the foundation as the principal tool for investing. How the foundation has been actively engaged in impact investing and in investing in inclusive things is by helping to build the movement specifically, whether it's funding research, whether it's funding convenings, whether it's using its resources to tell the world. And then the investment piece itself, we do personally.
Great. And so many newer philanthropists and investors are seeing a full quiver, right?
That's
and
correct.
Realizing let's
Right.
not start with one or the other, let's start with all of it.
Yeah, I think you're under leveraged if you just go into it with all you have to deal with is grants, or all you can deal with is the foundation. And we have given more personally to charity than we have through the foundation. Because we wanted to use the foundation as a strategic organization that built business plans, measured impact, et cetera. Well, they're still giving to things like, schools and churches and all, and we didn't really feel like we wanted to use the foundation. Like, I didn't want to tell our team at the foundation, this is what we care about, so this is where the checks should go. Our team really helps us develop the business plans in the areas that we're going to invest in.
Great. Others in the front here? Microphone?
Pretty loud.
Yeah, well, we are live streaming, so we need to have the microphones on. There we go. Blair's got one for you.
So I'm an educator, literally a mathematics educator. I started a nonprofit called Teachers to Teachers here in Chapel Hill.
Great.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand the business of this. Can you explain to me the difference between investing for social change and then just a nonprofit that really, if I'm working with teachers in Guatemala and Ecuador and Galapagos, there's no return on your investment except for true social change. And I'm trying to make that distinction
You're trying to
here.
understand the nonprofit versus for-profit.
Yeah, and then what's my place in that?
Well, there is a famous line in impact investing that, all investing has impact. The question is, what impact does it have? And that's true of us as consumers in the way that we use our dollars. It's true of us as investors, et cetera. We made a conscious decision to focus on the for-profit side. And why did we do that? Well, we're actually taking a good amount of care of the nonprofit side through our foundation and the granting work that we do. And what we felt was that our communities more broadly needed economic activity as a flywheel effect that would really help most folks in the community. That will be done through the spectrum of business. And so for us, when we talk about impact investing, we are talking about investments into funds or entities that will produce a financial return and a social return. No question, nonprofits start out with a social return. But my concern, quite honestly, about nonprofits is they don't focus enough on the business model. And in fact, one of the things I'm really excited about with impact investing is I think it may light a new path to new kinds of business models that can be embraced by nonprofits more broadly, that will make them even more attractive to a broader set of potential investors in their work. So I am chairman of National Geographic, and National Geographic is 129 years old, and I often say it might be the first social enterprise, because it was actually Alexander Graham Bell, who was our early president, who realized that it wasn't about the science and exploration we were going to fund. It was going to be in the power of storytelling and using technology, which at that time was a magazine, okay, to tell those stories where we could create earned income that went over the wall to fund more science and exploration. So it's really a beautiful early social enterprise model, and it continues today, both with cable television, with our digital assets, with our films, et cetera, to the point where $100 million a year comes over that transom because of those businesses. But we are a nonprofit parent. I mean, it is a nonprofit through and through. It just has a business model that's sustainable and scalable. And I'm hoping that impact investing has a side benefit of bringing new models forward that can be new ways to have impact, whether you're a nonprofit or not.
I totally agree with that. There's one right here. Oh, there's one in the back too. Let's see. If she's closer, whatever you're closest to, we'll start with. Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Dan Vermeer. I teach here in the business school. I'm interested in the relationship between impact investing and climate change. You don't hear a lot of the ventures being impacting climate change issues. And so I'm just wondering if this is a vehicle that can powerfully impact climate. And if it doesn't, I worry about the erosion of all the good that these kinds of investments do if we're in the context of a degrading climate that undermines people's quality of life over time. So I just wonder if you could talk about that relationship.
Sure, and it also puts a note in my head to double check how we're defining that on the network map. So if you had that question, you could actually go look at what is the activity. I will say there's one leading sector in impact, which is energy, clean energy. And we've all known that that's been a really active sector for impact investing. And at bite sizes, that actually brings some investors in who need, bigger investments than just the small place. But yes, I'm seeing it across the board, and I'm seeing it in two places. I'm seeing it from our impact investing perch at the Case Foundation, but I'm also seeing it through my work at National Geographic, where a lot of the young explorers that we're funding are CEOs of companies that are bringing solutions to climate in different ways. Not all companies, some of them, doing just meaningful exploration or science out in the field. But I think it's a really exciting, growing area, and I think that the sectors that touch on that will be some of the early leading sectors that will be looked at as helping to drive impact investing. So I'll take away, I've got to make sure that we answer your question through the network map if we've done our job right.
Great. And there was someone over here in the middle here, Blair.
Thank you. Matt Illian with Richmond Memorial Health Foundation in Virginia. One of our key initiatives is on impact investing this year. And my question for Eugene is on your thoughts on how to inspire sort of this network of, or ecology of kind of thought leadership, and sometimes, in some ways, it feels a little bit like magic. Sometimes people just get it, and they get inspired and want to be part of that. But we want to be part of kind of building that network. And you started your talk talking about someone who started out as kind of agnostic,
highly skeptical,
and then suddenly now a leader. And so, any just thoughts you have on work that, I mean, obviously you're printing a lot, but where you've seen actual change happen? Yeah,
I think case studies and data make a really big difference. I really do. I think that, your question about, what about climate change? We might have 5 people in here, and if I sat here and talked through the climate change investment opportunities, they might go, Wow, well, that is something I hadn't thought about. So it's such early, I don't know, Kathy, if you want to opine on this, but it's such early days that we find even a little bit goes a long way. But our commitment is to be that megaphone and spotlight out there that is highlighting what's out there with the network map, is telling case studies. So for instance, I just sat with Rockefeller Brothers. We co-lead the learning series for the Giving Pledge. Very high net worth individuals, as I think most of you know, who are very philanthropically minded, change the world minded. And the largest working group we have is impact investing, and many of them have been brought to activation. So we're doing case studies for them, and so I went up and we did a Rockefeller Brothers case study video-wise, and I interviewed them on taking the Rockefeller Brothers through, taking their endowments through or to impact. And we'll continue to push out case studies like that. We'll track data in the market and talk about new research reports. We blog, we publish, we do all we can, and it's some combination of all of those. But I guess what I started with was, to me, the good news is it actually doesn't take as much as you think to get people to really seriously consider it. But we need more of everything. We need more research, right? We could agree on that.
Totally.
We need more data. We need more investor tools. There's still big gaps in the ecosystem. There aren't analysts that follow this. There really aren't rating systems yet. So we need a lot of those things filling in the ecosystem. And part of the reason we did the map was to make those gaps apparent. And maybe there's someone actually at the business school now, whether they be student or otherwise, that says, I could fill that gap. I could start a company that could meet that need in the market. So it's really kind of trying to say, okay, what's missing in the market and what's there that can bring people and bring, hopefully, the whole ecosystem along.
That is a perspective that we share, a great deal of attention to that. I want to bring it down for the last question that I will ask, which is, you have done a lot of research on millennials and how they think about the world differently. Yeah. I'd love if you could share a little bit of the insight that you've gotten from that research, and also bring it down to our students and what advice you have for them as at the end of this amazing day, looking at sustainability and social impact. What can they take away from this, and what can they bring forward?
So I have to be honest with you and tell you that if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago, how I might respond would be just a touch different than maybe my perspective today. So what Kathy's referring to is we have funded the largest millennial study around perceptions on social good. And each year it changes. It's like how they look at their careers and employment in companies. It's how they give to nonprofits. It's how they use technology, you name it, okay? But the whole question was, where are they on social good? And why did we do that? Because we noted very early in the generation that it was a group that wanted to take their idealism to action. And we like to say, look, all young people through all time have been idealistic. I mean, Dean Boulding, I'm sure you've seen that play out time and time again here. But not everybody takes that idealism to action. And we had just seen perceptions and research that clearly indicated this generation is about that. And it was very, very exciting. And I still believe that is the intentionality of the generation and sort of where they come from. I must tell you that we were stopped in our tracks in the election, because I think what we're learning is that maybe the way this generation looks at idealism to action might be in ways that are different than the generations that came before them. Because as you know, many of them didn't show up to vote. And so we're really doing a lot of honest questioning and peeling back of the onion on the research. We did 3 different phases of research through the campaign last year to try to understand what was going on. So now we're going back and revisiting the data. And so I do think there's a question now about, do they just see do you just see like how you activate, how you engage, how you make change in different ways than the generations that came before you? Because, for a long time in America, the sharpest sword you have actually is the vote. And in this case, we see a generation that's highly activist in a variety of different ways, but not so much on using the basic power of the vote. But I am super bullish on the generation. I have been. I've referred to millennials as the next greatest generation because of my work with them, which has been going on for many, many years, and because of the extensive research. We also lead the largest millennial convening every year called MCon. And we've been doing that for 7 years. And last June, we had 700 of them in Washington, D.C. It was very exciting. So I think there's good news here, but I got to tell you, for someone who is not of the generation, I think I can speak for some others like me who are asking a lot of questions about, do you see change making differently than it has traditionally been defined? And I would say that's how we feel.
Good. Any last piece of advice for these?
I would say, I just want to give
yeah.
a separate shout out to the students. And I would say, my own life has taught me that no matter what sector I'm in, and no matter what job I'm performing or title I have, there's an opportunity for impact. And too often when I come to business schools, the MBA students almost apologize if they're going to Wall Street, or apologize if they're going to consulting firms or consumer, packaged goods. I have seen cases play out across every sector and across every role where one change maker inside of a traditional organization, and often that can be a young person, says, well, what if we thought about this? And so for those of you that either feel pressured or it's your passion to go into more traditional businesses, I want to say to you, you can do that and have extraordinary impact, okay? But if you're going into a nonprofit, a philanthropy, the public sector, or in some other role, I hope you feel the wind at your back. I hope you feel a lot of us championing you, because what we need are the best and the brightest, the most well-educated amongst us, really focused on not just the challenges, but the extreme opportunity that exists to help our communities thrive both here at home in America and across the world. And I really hope you would take an unbelievable privilege of the education that you have here and go change the world.
Wonderful. Please join me in thanking.
Thank you, Kathy.
Before you ladies leave, Jean, may you come back for just one moment? I'm sorry. We have to do an official thank you as well. So first of all, Kathy, thank you so much for facilitating. And Jean, thank you for this fantastic fireside chat. It has been an honor to have you here as a keynote speaker for our 12th annual Sustainable Business and Social Impact Conference. I know that I speak for the rest of the crowd when I say that I greatly appreciate the insights that you have shared on impact investing and social entrepreneurship and the social impact space as a whole. We have a small token of our appreciation.
Oh, wow.
Which
awesome.
is a Duke basketball signed by the infamous Coach K.
Coach K, whose leadership conference I went to a few years ago. So
Thank you so much, Jean.
This will be in my office with great pride. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy to be with you.